Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today we are going to be talking about one of Philip K. Dick's most famous books, and that is Ubik. I read this book a few months back and was completely taken with the very strange story and setting that Dick creates in this. It's a really wonderful novel and a very fun read. With that, let's get a little bit into the synopsis of this story. It's set in a future 1992, where psychic powers are being used in corporate espionage. At the same time, cryonic tech allows recently deceased people to be maintained in a lengthy state of hibernation. The story follows Joe Chip, a technician at a psychic agency, who begins to experience strange alterations in reality that can be temporarily reversed by Ubik, which is... I don't even want to say it's a drug. It comes in an aerosol can, and it's kind of presented throughout the novel as more of a household item than it is a drug. So yes, that is the weird tale that is told in the story of Ubik. Now let's look a little bit at its publication history. The idea for Ubik came from a short story that Philip K. Dick wrote back probably as early as 1962 called What the Dead Men Say. And it was published in Worlds of Tomorrow magazine in June of 1964. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that, but I'll put up the cover here so that you can see what that looks like. After that, Dick was still thinking often about this idea, and he turned the seeds that he got from that story into the novel Ubik, which he actually wrote probably mid-60s. And for some odd reason, Doubleday sat on it for a while before publishing it in 1969. And they published, of course, a first edition and then also a book club edition. This is the book club edition, which mirrors exactly the first edition, but is made for a cheaper market. Of course, this quickly became one of Dick's most beloved books. It is a classic. For many people, this is the best of all of Philip K. Dick's books. And while I can't go that far, it is absolutely way up there for me. It's one of his best, absolutely. Just really quick, I have to say this in a lot of Philip K. Dick videos. I just like to look at his characters, and I like to do that in most of my reviews anyway. But Philip K. Dick is kind of infamous for not really fleshing out his characters. And while I found that that wasn't really true in The Three Stigmatas of Palmer Eldritch, it was true in this one. I think that Ubik has a lot of caricatures and not a lot of characters, and it's not terrible. Like many Dick books, you usually go into them expecting great ideas and situations that kind of boggle the mind more than you are character development. So it doesn't really pull away from the novel, honestly, for me. But I did just want to bring it up that this is an example of what he is infamous for, and that is not really fully developing his characters. Alright, let's move on to the reasons that you should read this book. The number one reason, and the part that I had the most fun with in reading this book, was the humor. This is, in my opinion, of all the Dick that I've read, this is the funniest. He has a sense of humor in this that is absolutely incredible. And what he's poking at mostly is this idea of capitalism gone to its most extreme end, where corporations have kind of taken over everything, and we see the effect of this on the everyday life of individuals. And we see this a lot in science fiction. The one that I read most recently that I think is also a satire or has a humor to it is Lem's The Futurological Congress, which I feel like is different than... He takes a different approach than Dick at his comedy, in the sense that he just creates the most absurd, abstract ways to express his satirical ideas that really, truly... really border on absurdism. And I think Dick went the other direction and came up with very concrete ways to express his thoughts on what capitalism gone awry would really look like. And I can give a perfect example of this. And that is at the very beginning, he wants to open the door to his apartment to let people in, and the door demands 5 cents from him. So his door expects this 5 cents, that he drops in 5 cents to be able to open it every time he opens and closes it. And to the main character, Joe Chip, this seems like it was a tip for the door that was not mandatory, and he tells the door that, and the door responds and says, no, it's mandatory, look in your lease. So he runs over and looks in his lease, and sure enough, it is mandatory that he inserts 5 cents every time he opens his door. And while this is kind of terrifying, it is also really hilarious, this concept of having to pay for every aspect of one's life, even down to opening and closing the door. And he starts to take the door off its hinges, and the door is threatening to sue him. I found that the entire text of this book had this incredibly concrete witticism behind it that makes it absolutely worth a read. That is, in my opinion, the top reason that you should read this book, and why I recommend it so highly. It was absolutely hilarious. The second reason I think you should read it is for the philosophy. Of course, we already talked about the concept of capitalism gone awry to an extent that just makes the world a very difficult place to live in. But we also get information paranoia, where companies are afraid of people stealing information from them psychically, by people reading their minds and taking their ideas and information. This reminded me a little bit of Haruki Murakami's Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, which is also obsessed with information and who controls information. But near the end of the book, it takes a real turn, and he starts to look at the concept of death and what it means to die and what happens after we die. And we eventually get the concept of Ubik, which ends up being like a metaphor for a god or some kind of afterlife deity that can save our souls. But it's interesting because it comes in a can, and again we loop back to that concept of corporations, and even the idea of a savior in a can is that wit that I'm talking about as you read through this book. Compared to the other Dick books that I've read, this one is definitely up there, but it is not my absolute favorite. There's a couple of parts, or a couple of reasons that I don't rate this number one. First off, it uses a trope that I'm not a huge fan of in science fiction, and I can't tell you what that trope is without serious plot spoilers, so I'm not going to bring it up. But if you are interested, I will talk about it more in the deep read video that I do plan on putting up in a couple of days. If you are interested and you've read the book, or you don't mind the plot spoiled, you can watch that deep read, and I will let you know what trope that is that I'm not a huge fan of. That doesn't say anything bad about the novel or Philip K. Dick as a writer. That's just my personal preference, and really I only bring it up to explain why I don't put this at number one. Number two is, I don't feel that the philosophical message in this book is as clear as it is in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, or The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, which I feel both have really strong philosophical statements. It was a little bit harder to find the philosophical statement in this one, and I feel that the reason for that is because this one was leaning towards humor more than it was the depth that those two books really had, and there was nothing wrong with that. And I don't mean to imply that the philosophical statement in this is small in any way, shape, or form. It's huge. It's Philip K. Dick, so of course he's making quite a statement. It's just not as big as the other two for me. Yeah, so I 100% recommend this book. I think you should absolutely read it. It's a classic science fiction masterpiece, and I think it holds up really well. It reads, I think, just as powerfully today as it would have when it came out in 1969. Anybody that likes science fiction or speculative fiction would absolutely love this book, so give it a read. Alright, thank you very much for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please click like. If you like this kind of content, please click subscribe. We'll be making a lot more of it in the future. And thanks so much for watching.